God has stamped one of a kind, one of one, on everything within the universe. I was moved recently by the story of a mandarin duck. On March 1st, 2016, a mandarin duck appears at an Irving Park, which is a suburb of Dallas. And according to the NBC News reporter, Centennial Park is home to many birds, but none like the duck known as Manny. In fact, there were many who showed up to see Manny because Manny was out of place and out of sort. A photographer took pictures of Manny. Because of the beauty of Manny, those who went to see Manny gave her that nickname. It was a rare sight. And as they looked at this sight, they started asking the question, where did this duck come from? Because it doesn't belong in North America, let alone in North Texas. And so as they kept looking and studying the bird, they discovered that this bird originates from East Asia and is a native to Japan. They went on finally to ask the big question, how did Manny get here? And then finally, there were those who studied this matter. They came to the conclusion and said that Manny must have gotten caught up in the migration of some other birds, thinking that it was one of them, and therefore made its way thousands of miles to a suburban town outside of Dallas. You know, you can be the most beautiful bird in the world, but if you start flying with the wrong birds, you can end up in some of the most strange places you can ever imagine. When you lose your sense of identity, your sense of who you are, it doesn't matter how beautiful you are. You can start running with some ugly ducklings, and they'll cause you to live beneath your privilege, beneath your beauty, beneath your unique environment. And that's why you got to be careful of who you fly with. You got to be careful of who you run with. You got to be careful with who you hang out with. Manny is off course, way out of place, because perhaps Manny was flying with the wrong crowd. I wonder today who's listening to me that's flying with the wrong crowd and have found yourself in some strange situations, some strange places, hanging out with some strange people, living beneath your beauty, living beneath your splendor, living beneath your opportunity, and an ouch goes right there. Tell somebody that I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Oh, you ought to tell somebody I'm special. You ought to put that in the chat room. I'm special. When God made you, he had no one else in mind. I can recall when I was first introduced to black art, and as I looked around the art gallery, I was confused by the pricing of the various pictures. I noticed some small pictures with large price tags, some large pictures with small price tags. So I decided, because I didn't have much money, that I would start my collection with a small picture. And when I prepared to pay for the artwork, the picture cost more than I expected and more than I can afford. I was shocked at the price of my little picture. And so I asked the salesperson if they had priced it right. They said, well, let me check. They came back and said, oh, yes, it's right. I said, well, explain to me how this little picture costs more than that big picture over there. And that's when they responded by saying, well, what you have in your hand is an original piece. Said, but what you see over there in terms of that poster-sized picture, said that's called a reproduction. And so it's a poster, it's a reproduction, but an original is always more valuable than a reproduction. And so as you see the picture, the procession on the screen, know this, that God has made you an original. You're not a reproduction of anybody or anything. Know that you have value. Tell somebody, I have value. And you ought not ever allow people to devalue you or to undervalue you. Know that you are a picture of great price. Stop apologizing for having good taste. Stop apologizing for desiring something better, wanting to be better, or striving to do better. You ought to know your worth and know your value. And when you know your worth and your value, nobody can cheapen you. Why settle for being a cheap copy of someone else when you are an original design of God? I'm gonna move it along, but as I load my literary wagon, know this, that life is providential to God. For you formed my inner parts. You covered me in my mother's womb, is what the psalmist is saying here in verse number 13. What the psalmist wants us to understand is that our existence is the end result of providential planning. That the divine, in his foresight and foreknowledge through his intervention, has brought about you and I. God's providential care for each of us is what keeps us and sustains us each and every day. In other words, we are of divine origin. We have been heaven sent, and we are miracles in and of ourselves because God made us, and when he made us in his own image. Jeremiah 1:5 in the ESV says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nation. That's what God told Jeremiah. One day my mother said to me, now, you know, when I think about my life and I think about your life, she said, you know, you're blessed to be here. I said, really? She said, yes, because I was just thinking about what else I could have done with my life. I said, really? She said, yeah, if I had never met your father, you wouldn't be here today. I said, really? She said, yeah, and if I had followed my initial plans and went off into the military, you wouldn't be here today. Then she went on to talk about if I had gone to college, you wouldn't be here today. She just kept going down a list of things that she could have done with her life, and then she underscored it with, you wouldn't be here today. So finally she paused, she looked at me, and she said, what do you think about that? I said, well, now that you've said what you have to say, I said, let me just say this. You know, it mattered not what you purposed and desired to do. It mattered not how you could have done something else. Truth of the matter is, God purposed for me to be here. And can I tell you this? Whether I came through you or someone else, I was coming. Whether I came by bus, plane, or train, or airplane, I was coming because God purposed for me to be here, because he knew me before he knew you, and before he formed me in your womb. He already had ordained that I would be here, that I would proclaim his gospel. And all I'm trying to tell you is that God had you on his mind. And no matter how you got here, just know that God had you on his mind.